Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, October 18, 2023, the committee commenced consideration of Bill C-320, an act to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act. I would now like to welcome our witness today, who is the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Colin Carey, Member of Parliament for Oshawa. So, Mr. Carey, if you want to start, welcome first of all, and if you want to start for up to 5 minutes with your opening.
Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues of all parties for speaking in support of this bill at both first and second readings, as well as voting unanimously in support of Bill C-320 at second reading. I want to thank you as well to Lisa Freeman, the person who inspired this bill. As stated before, this bill is intended to help families who are plunged into unfathomable situations, demoralized and re-traumatized by the action of the Parole Board of Canada and Correctional Services, institutions that say they are supportive of victims of crime. As an example of how victims are re-traumatized due to lack of information, allow me to tell you a little bit about Lisa's story. Lisa's father was tragically bludgeoned to death by an axe murderer in 1991, and I think it's also worth noting that this murderer was out on parole when this horrific crime took place. She was caught off guard when her father's killer was eligible for early parole only 20 years into his 25 years to life sentences. She believes, and I agree, that lack of transparency regarding how parole dates and eligibility are determined causes the victims of crime to experience confusion, frustration, trauma, and resentment for our justice system. It's the responsibility of government to ensure that victims of crime are treated with the utmost respect and dignity. This legislation makes a simple amendment to the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, disclosure of information to victims, that would provide such respect and dignity. It would require that information regarding the review and eligibility for all forms of parole be communicated in writing to the offender's victims, including an explanation of how the dates were determined for parole and explaining this process in an effort to be as transparent as possible. We can't argue with the logic of the bill. Sadly, victims don't have any support compared to the support our government gives to criminals. A murderer's rights should never trump a victim's rights, yet they seem to every single time. A sentence like life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years is meant to imply severity and punishment. This is simply not true and misleading to families, and it's also misleading to the public. Offenders serving a life sentence without parole for 25 years can be released on other forms of parole well before for personal development, temporary absences, and community service work. What we're trying to correct with this bill is simply victims' access to this information as well as an explanation. A recent update from Lisa Freeman exemplifies this. She said, "I was notified in July that my father's killer's daily parole was extended for 6 months, and when it goes up again for renewal in January of 2024, and even if he doesn't request full parole, he can automatically be granted it at the same time. No hearing I can attend, no opportunity for me to object, just an in-office paper decision." Also, at the same time, I was notified that the conditions of parole that I have in place, no transfers to the province of Ontario and parts of BC, can be lifted at any time his case management team feels he would benefit from attending courses in these areas. What an outrage that the only comfort for me and my family from this axe murderer can be lifted at the whim of his team. The system needs to be recalibrated. The rights of victims should be made equal to or better than the rights of the offenders. So here we have it, colleagues. A killer can be released into a community where his victims live at the whim of his case management team. No need to explain to the victims how the decision was made and when the release will take place. I know that you will agree that this is unconscionable. Families who have suffered because of an offender's action don't deserve to be re-victimized by the parole system. Victims of crime have enough to carry. Under the guise of rehabilitation, victims of crime often have to stand back and watch while violent offenders exercise their rights, which, as most victims of crime find, are nothing more than a mockery of justice and a basic common sense. Victims deserve better, colleagues. At the very least, they deserve accurate, timely explanations and information. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.